Thank you very much and welcome everybody on this beautiful fall afternoon in Michigan. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I will be discussing perils of high net worth parenting and the implications of these problems for divorced financial professionals. A little bit of a background for myself. As you may be able to tell from my accent, I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union, the so-called classless society, which of course it wasn't. And consequently, I have a fascination with socioeconomic status, class, and I'm fascinated to combine that interest with my interest in child development and family therapy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have a very active practice here in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. So with that background, I wanted to share with you my goals for today's presentation. I'm hoping to give you an informative overview of the field of parenting for high net worth individuals. And that, of course, is both children and young adults. As many of us know, parenting does not end at 18 or even 22 or at college graduation. We remain parents for the rest of our lives. I think it would be fair to say that most people on the webinar today are either parents or grandparents or have a significant other in their life who they care about, a child or a young adult, or possibly have clients they work with who are parents and grandparents. And so I'm finding that this topic of high net worth parenting is of interest to many, many people, not necessarily parents. And I also wanted to discuss a little bit this term, high net worth parent. The term came from the literature. I did not make this phrase up. I don't love it. I think that high net worth means a lot of things to different people. For the purposes of this discussion, it was defined in the literature as twice the American standard median income for a family. So American family right now is approximately $75,000 a year annual income. Half of the people are above and half of the people are below, and so $150,000 in income is what they consider to be high net worth parenting, and that number seems very low to me, to be honest. I don't know if you are agreeing with me right now. I would probably define that as maybe upper middle class or even middle class, depending on where in the country you live, but just for your information, that's what the literature out there defines. I'm going to keep this presentation fairly casual. We will have a Q&A at the end. I'm going to discuss implications for financial professionals, and most importantly, I'm really hoping that this presentation will start a conversation with your family and friends around your dinner table. I know a lot of the time the webinars and presentations you guys watch and attend are quite dry for your family and friends. You may not bring it home with you. I'm hoping this presentation and you will bring home with you, either to say, she's crazy, this is ridiculous, I wish I had these problems, or to say, you know, I really think I would like to rethink how I am parenting. So, without further ado, I want to tell you that about 6 years ago, of course, the economy was dreadful and terrible everywhere in the country, but in Michigan in particular, things were very, very dire. And my husband and I had an opportunity to purchase a home in the best school district in the state. It was on sale, was about half price, and we could stretch and we could afford this home. And one of the thoughts I had at that time was, do I want to be parenting our children, who are right now ages 10 and 12, both girls, next to these rich folks? And I'm making air quotes with my hands right now, you can't see me. Next to these rich folks. What would that mean to me and my family? So these are the conversations that happen in my home. 1, you can't have a horse, not even a small one. My 10-year-old is completely obsessed with horses. 2, just because we don't have an indoor pool like your friends doesn't mean our house is small. It is smaller, but it's not small. 3, Target and Walmart actually do sell way more clothes than Lululemon. It only seems to you that everyone wears Lulu because so many of your classmates do. Last year, when this was a pressing concern to my 11-year-old, we actually went online and did a little research on the comparative market share of Target and Walmart. She truly was convinced that everybody has Lululemon. It was an interesting conversation. And 4, no, you still can't have a horse. And yes, I know 3 of your friends have horses. You still can't have one. So did we make a mistake by moving into an affluent area? Does wealth guarantee good child-rearing outcomes? It's a great question, and I'm here to say that wealth does not guarantee good child-rearing outcomes. Friends with horses and indoor pools do not necessarily have a better chance at raising good kids with good outcomes than the rest of us. So it is actually somewhat harder, and in some ways a lot harder, to be a parent if you're a high net worth individual. Here are 5 reasons why, and these are the reasons I will go over in greater depth and detail throughout this webinar. 1, I tend to find that high net worth individuals have unrealistically high expectations of outcomes for their children. When much is given, much is expected in return. When somebody says to you, you can go to any college anywhere in the world, I will pay for everything, no questions asked, that's a lot of pressure for a high school senior. That's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. The expectations are very, very high. 2, lack of connection with children and family because of job and wealth management demands. 3, children are often spoiled with material goods and rescuing behaviors. And by rescuing behaviors, I mean parents coming in and taking the negative consequences away from the children, interfering with the natural negative consequences of choices. So an example of that might be bringing lunch to school or bringing a musical instrument to school when they get forgotten at home, talking to teachers or principals when homework is not completed, talking to coaches, basically interfering with negative consequences, doing their job of teaching kids right choices versus wrong choices. And I have seen this behavior go all the way from toddler years all the way through young adults, interfering with the job of courts and police by getting the kids out of the country when they're in trouble, by just getting the course of justice that was not served, unfortunately. Number 4, personality traits that aid in income accumulation and conservation are not necessarily the personality traits that one would like in a great parent. And number 5, lack of trust and lack of intimacy and connection. So what are these outcomes that we're talking about? When I say outcome, here are some of the things we look at and some of the things that research looks at. Compared to children from the inner city, children who grow up in affluent suburbs have higher use of drugs and alcohol, including binge drinking, widespread cheating and acts of delinquency, higher rates of mental illness, including depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and somatic complaints. By somatic complaints, I mean things like headaches and stomach aches, where your physical body shows your mental anguish, things like neck ache, back pain, sleep problems, appetite problems, any kind of physical problem. In my office, anxiety disorders are by far the most common presentation. Also have higher rates of self-injuries, such as cutting and burning. The latest one in the self-injury sort of arsenal is injuries with erasers. If you rub an eraser on your skin long enough and hard enough, you will actually get a very serious burn. Low tenderness and low closeness, and higher rates of narcissism, which is defined as sort of the thought process that they are the best, nobody else compares to them. Lack of deep social connection, and higher levels of psychotropic medications. So the article here that I'm quoting is this one, The Problem with Rich Kids. It comes from Psychology Today. It's about 3 years old now, but I really like I really like the article. It gives a good overview of this problem, and it goes in depth into some solutions as well. So, 1 second. Okay. So let's take a look one at a time at what these issues might be. One, unrealistically high expectations. I want to run a scenario by you. Let's just say that a child comes home from career day at school and says, I want to be a nurse. I've looked out there, looked around, done my research, and what I want to do more than anything else is I want to be a nurse. Let's say this conversation takes place in a middle-class home where parents maybe are nurses, firefighters, policemen, teachers, maybe even janitors in a hospital. Most likely the response to the child will be, great, amazing, we're so proud of you, that is a great profession, you will help people, and you know what, you'll make a good living doing it. What would happen if this child came home and said, I want to be a nurse, and both parents are doctors, or one parent is a doctor? If they're business owners, if they are a high net worth individual, the first question they're going to ask is, why don't you want to be a doctor? Why settle for being a nurse? Right? So some kids can handle it. No question, there are some kids who can be doctors, but you know what? Some kids can't handle medical school. And when expectations are unrealistically high, it leads to a lot of problems in children, anxiety in particular. What I see out there in society is huge pressure to perform from a very early age all the way through college admissions. So from putting pressure on kids at age 2 and 3 to get into a good preschool, to stay into a good preschool, to get into a good ballet class, a karate class, or a language class, or a music class, and listen to the instructor and obey directions and sit in a circle all the way through college admissions. And when I start asking questions, because parents come to me and say, you know what, she's going to get kicked out. This kid can't handle preschool. What am I going to do? When I ask questions and I gently suggest that, you know, maybe it is not age appropriate for a 3-year-old to be at school all day. Or maybe it's not age appropriate for a 5 or a 7-year-old to be doing 10, 12, 15 hours of sports per week. The answers I usually get from parents are shock, surprise, disappointment, and then they say things like, but everybody does it. And on some level they are correct. We have really flipped child development on its ear, and they are correct. Things that a generation ago was an expectation of a first or second grader now is an expectation in preschool. We expect kids to know their letters, to recognize their name. A 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, it's too early. They don't need to do that. There is no correlation between early reading and early literacy and high school graduation. But the pressure is definitely there. And the pressure, parents feel the pressure from the teachers feel the pressure from the parents. It's academics first. And unfortunately, that leads to kids who are very, very unhealthy. They are out of balance with physical activity and academics. It leads to kids who need to be medicated in unprecedented numbers. It leads to kids who don't go outside just to play, or even just indoor play. They don't have time to play. It leads to anxiety disorders and a tremendous amount of accommodations that need to take place just to allow kids to do their schoolwork. So problem number one, unrealistically high expectations. When a lot is given, much more is expected in return. What I see in this situation oftentimes is children feel they have to live out their parents' dreams. And that to me is a very heartbreaking situation. Kids don't see what they want. They want to be a certain profession. They want to be an athlete. They want to be a musician. They want to be a nurse. They feel that they have to deliver their parents' expectation, what their parents expect them to be. I always say if I ask a high school student what they want to be when they grow up and they have a complete answer ready to go, I always feel it's not their voice, it's their parents' voice. Granted, there are some exceptional high school kids and they know exactly what they want to be, but truthfully, how can they know? They don't know what's out there. So if they know exactly what it is, it's probably their parents talking. Number two, lack of connection with children and family because of job wealth management demands. by and large, high net worth individuals have big jobs or money and wealth management demands. These are not 9-to-5 jobs. These are not jobs that are local. They take them all over the world, 24/7, and the stakes are very, very high. This is the calculation that people do, sometimes consciously if they're honest with themselves, and sometimes unconsciously. How much would it cost me to go watch my son's Little League game? How much money would I lose if I attend a concert? How much would my clients or business associates miss me if I take half a day off because it's Halloween? And oftentimes the number that an individual comes up with is huge. It could cost them thousands of dollars to take a half a day off. When I look around the concert hall when my kids have concerts or art shows or science fairs or whatever it is, every single parent is there, and I swear the economy in my zip code must lose like millions of dollars. It's a tough call to make. Investing in human resources, like our children, is a very tough call when financial resources are on the line. In addition to this, work is constant, international, and 24/7. It's very hard to disconnect. I'm sure we're all checking our phones as this webinar is going. We are typing away. It's very hard to disconnect, but children truly need undivided attention. It's not enough just to be physically present with them. Quitting or slowing down at work or with charity activity will potentially endanger livelihood for many individuals. You know, if I want to close my practice tomorrow, a handful of my clients will need to be reassigned to other therapists. And of course, my family will suffer financially, but that's pretty much it. If a high net worth individual decides to slow down or quit or close the business, dozens, hundreds, thousands of others will be out of work, will have no benefits for their kids. The stakes are very, very high. So when I ask parents to slow down, to take some time, to enjoy their kids, to be home with them more, I am fully aware that I'm asking them something that would be a lot harder for them than for a middle-class family. Sometimes people do this calculation as well. If somebody makes $10, $12, $15 an hour and they have a baby, childcare may cost them $5, $10 an hour. So at that point, they might as well stay home. At that point, they might as well just enjoy their baby and rejoin the workforce at a later time. But if an individual is making hundreds of thousands of dollars per day, childcare is not an issue. So oftentimes a decision gets made to go to work or stay at work while raising their family. And so what we see is, of course, that last point on the slide, parents are often physically absent. They have hired help, or they're mentally distracted even when they're home. Several people I work with have nannies, and nannies in plural, not just one nanny. I have a family I work with who have 3 nannies on rotating schedule. Mom is a stay-at-home wife, and dad is a businessman. So it's very hard for this mom to make a case for being there because there's always another adult, sometimes more than one. So when I say things like, you know, I feel like your kids can really benefit from your attention. I feel like they really would appreciate if you could come and watch them play tennis, take a swim lesson, or even go to the doctor with them, go to a dentist with them. She's frankly very puzzled by that. Why? There's plenty of adults to do that. She doesn't need to be there. And that, of course, leads to a tremendous lack of connection, a real deep divide and a disconnect between her and her husband and her family. Number 3, children of high net worth individuals are often spoiled with material goods and rescuing behaviors. Truthfully, when I say no to a horse, my daughter is not happy with me, but she understands. She understands that there's absolutely no way there's room in the budget for a horse and everything that comes with a horse. It's much harder to say no to demands that our children make when financial scarcity is not a reason. Because if you can't say, no, honey, it's not in the budget, you have to come up with a good reason why you're saying no. You have to articulate a parenting philosophy to back up your answer. You know, you can say things like, we believe in, I don't know, giving to charity instead of having a horse, or traveling the world instead of having a horse, or whatever your parenting philosophy is. You can't fall back on, we can't afford it. And so what happens when financial scarcity is not a reason, then a lot of things become a yes. Yes, you can have that. Yes, you can have this. And yes, you can have the other. And what happens is from a very early age, kids have stuff. Stuff, stuff, stuff. It's electronics, it's toys, it's clothes. And what happens when a child has too much, I don't need to tell you, you probably see this in your home, they don't appreciate the stuff that they have. It gets broken, it gets tossed aside, it gets forgotten, it gets neglected, and it makes parents crazy, yes, but beyond that, it is very damaging to their development. There's a fabulous book called How Much Is Enough, and here's a link to the Amazon page. The book really articulates what is the problem when kids grow up with too much stuff. What happens to their psyche, what happens to their development when the word enough is not in their vocabulary. And what I like in particular about this book is that they interviewed adults who have been overindulged as children, and they talk about the fact that they never learned to care for things. They never learned the value of things. They never learned how to earn an item, how to feel proud that they earned something. I really encourage you to take a look at that book. Along with stuff and spoiling kids with presents and toys and electronics, come rescuing behaviors, and I touched on them earlier, but basically it is not allowing natural consequences to do their job of teaching kids right from wrong. It's coming in and rescuing. What that implies to a child, just so you know, just you see the big picture here, when a child is rescued over and over and over, our expectations are too low. And the implication to the child is, you're not capable. You can't handle this, honey. I'm going to come to school with your viola, with your lunch, with your sneakers, because I'm not expecting you to remember. You just can't do it. And over and over and over, we tell our kids, you're not capable because I feel the need to rescue you. I'll share with you what I do with my daughters. I have a trick. I say to them that I will rescue you twice per semester, twice in the fall, twice in the spring. If you forget something, you have 2 chances. Lunch, viola, whatever it might be, I will be there twice. If I can, if I don't have patience, I will come and help you out. And I say that because, you know what, we all lose things. We all forget things. Last week I was locked out of my own office. It happens. We have a lot of balls in the air and things happen. I don't want them to feel like they can't approach me if they have a problem. But beyond twice, that's on you. That's your problem. You have to develop a strategy of remembering what it is that you need to pack. I'm not going to keep spoiling you and rescuing you because I don't think that I'm doing you any favors. I have expectations that you will work it out. Okay, number 4. I hope I'm not offending anybody out there, but I'm going to say that personality traits that help people accumulate income and become high net worth individuals are not necessarily the personality traits that lead to being a good parent. So these are 2 different traits. They can coexist in one person. I'm not saying that everybody who's a high net worth individual is a terrible parent. I'm not saying that at all. But stereotypically, successful business people are controlling, impatient, insensitive, unemotional, do not want to be understood, and don't want to stop and explain. They just want to tell you what to do and move on, right? We know people like that. We have bosses like that. They tell you what to do and they want things done. Successful parents tend to be patient, understanding, sensitive, have the ability to feel and express emotions, and have time for their children. Sort of Mr. Rogers type. Mr. Rogers type, not necessarily Mr. Rogers, was probably not the biggest tycoon. Time, that last line, is crucial. Children need a significant amount of time with their loved ones. High quality time is important. No electronic devices, no distractions, but time is important. Just time, just being there, being in the same place at the same time, maybe doing different things, but being together. One of my very favorite parenting books is Hold On to Your Kids. It's about 10 years old now. The link is at the bottom there. And it really does a wonderful job explaining why kids need adults, why kids need parents, not social media, not friends, but parents. And the basic gist of the book is that when a child is having a problem and they go to their friend to try to solve that problem, a friend is not likely to look out after our child first and foremost. A friend is more likely to watch out for position in the hierarchy in middle school or high school, for their own self-esteem, for their own needs. They're not likely to put aside their needs in order to help our child. But parents do that. Parents do just that. We will put aside everything to help our kids. So time with your kids is crucial. We have a rule in my house that if there's a carpool that's going anywhere, I drive. Not because I don't trust other parents driving, although sometimes I don't, but because I want to hear the conversations that happen in the car. You're probably familiar with the term helicopter parent. I call myself the submarine parent. And again, it's a term in the literature. I did not make it up. But I'm the submarine parent. I always know what's going on, but nobody knows I'm there. So hold on to your kids, spend time, go for the personality traits that are going to lead to great outcomes over the personality traits that aid in income accumulation. Number 5, lack of trust that leads to lack of intimacy and connection. From the very early age, kids are coached not to discuss family money with outsiders, and to be cautious when discussing family money with their own family. And this is very damaging to a child. If you tell them, don't talk about going to Florida on grandpa's plane. Don't say that. We don't need to say about grandpa's plane or somebody else's plane. Just don't say that. They get confused. They don't understand, but they're really happy about the plane. They're 3, 4, 5 years old. There's nothing more important to a little boy than talk to his friends about planes and details of the trip. So that leads to a disconnect. That leads to a divide between him and his little friends. When discussing money with family, sometimes there are issues too. One part of the family, one branch of the family tends to be higher net worth than the other branch of the family. It's unusual for people to have sort of the same level of net worth. So what ends up happening, unfortunately, is there is a disconnect even within the family. You can discuss private schools and trips with one side of the family but not the other, because they can be jealous. There could be some feelings of inadequacy, some feelings of, why are you complaining to me? You have nothing to complain about. Your life is beautiful. So lack of connection. And this is a great phrase from the book Wealth of Possibilities. Wealth acts as a magnifier and accelerator of personality traits and family dynamics. So whatever is going on within the family, within the individual, high wealth will magnify those personality traits and those family dynamics. I'll give you a perfect example of that from my practice. I had a young mother here who was very concerned that her daughters are not safe while visiting grandparents. And I was kind of confused, and I was asking more questions, and she shared with me that grandparents have a belief that rules of society do not really apply to them. They are beyond, above, not necessary. They don't need to listen. So practically speaking, what that meant is there were no children's seats. There were no child restraints. Kids just kind of rattled around the back seat. because, you know, they were too good for that. It wasn't necessary. And unfortunately, what that also meant is that there was a fair amount of drinking and driving. If grandparents and grandmother in particular felt like taking kids on a drive after having a few cocktails, she would do that. She was not concerned about being pulled over or being tested, breathalyzed. She just kind of, she's used to being treated as above and beyond. And this mother who came to me, who was not the daughter, she was the daughter-in-law, was very concerned. And when we started brainstorming this, she said, you know, I can't just not let the kids go there, because last time I said something, they stopped contributing to their trust fund, and the kids lost something like $1 million. So every time I say something, their trust funds get cut off, and then they're going to be mad at me. So how do I go about making sure my kids are safe, but at the same time, their trust funds get funded for the future? You know, it was a difficult situation. I don't know if I had the best answers, but the best answer we came up with is that there would be an adult, a non-relative like a nanny, who would always be with the children when they're visiting grandparents, just to kind of keep an eye on what's going on and maybe suggest alternatives. Maybe the nanny would drive and grandma would just be a passenger. I don't think it's the best solution, but truly I think that the wealth that this family was cushioned with, I think cushion is a good word, it really just, it made them feel that the rules do not apply. And the kids, unfortunately, were suffering because of that. Intimacy without connection is impossible, and you can't connect without trust. So if you're going to not say something to your friends, not say something to your family, it will be very difficult to develop trust and intimacy. And truthfully, I think some high net worth individuals do suffer from lack of friendships and lack of connections. They feel that no matter what they say, people are going to just say, oh, you poor little rich girl, you know, you have everything you need, what are you complaining about? And they will not have good, intimate friends. So a toxic combination, the thing to avoid here is overly high expectations coupled with low closeness. The book that I'm quoting here is Price of Privilege by Madeline Levine. I notice here that it's not on the slide. I will be sure to correct that in the slide that you will receive tomorrow. The price of privilege, that is the combination of two factors that you're trying to avoid: overly high expectations coupled with low closeness. So every time you talk to a kid, you should not start with, how was that test? What did the coach say? Why didn't you do better? Instead, it will be much better to meet them where they're at, you know, asking questions that are more open-ended. How was your day? What did you like? What did you learn? Where do you want to go? And here's my favorite question too, when a kid has a problem. What did you already try to solve that problem? What did you try? Tell me what you thought of, and I'll help you brainstorm the next step. That really would lead to a much, much higher closeness between you. Here's some implications that I thought of for you as divorce financial professionals. I know there are others. I'm happy to open up the discussion in a few minutes to get your take on this. But one implication is, please reassure your clients who are afraid of losing affluence as a result of divorce that their children will be just fine. You don't need to be a high net worth individual to raise good kids with good outcomes. Clearly, we don't want kids to live in poverty. We want access to good health care, to good professionals, to good schools, to safe neighborhoods, but affluence is not a necessary prerequisite to raising good kids. Number two, whenever possible, fight for outcomes that will promote parent-child closeness and time together, even if there is a financial cost to doing so. I try to discourage parents whenever possible from taking jobs out of town or traveling too much for business. They say to me, you know what, it's not a big deal. There's always an adult in the house. My ex can do it. There's a nanny here. Grandparents can come in. Why can't I? And I say, you know what, all those are fine, but at the end of the day, you're the parent, and they will always come to you. the problem, I have nothing against au pairs and nannies, but the fundamental problem with a paid caregiver is that they're temporary. Kids on some level understand that the relationship they forge is a temporary relationship. It can be as short as a year if you have an au pair in your home, or a nanny that's a few years and then they grow out of a need for a nanny. Relationship with you, of course, is permanent and for a lifetime. Number 3, encourage clients to articulate their financial values to themselves and to their children. What is it that you value? How do you want to use your money to help others, contribute to charity, start a business, contribute to growth of the economy? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Articulate it to yourself first and then to your children. And kids, even very, very young kids, can understand that. Encourage parents to have appropriate expectations of their children, not too high, because then kids will fail and they will feel a lot of criticism, and not too low, because that implies to them that they're not capable. And enforce your expectations consistently without rescuing behaviors. And that is the end of my part of the presentation. I really would like to hear from you if you think there are other implications, if you have questions, or any other thoughts you want to share.
So yes, everyone, if you have any questions, then feel free to send them through the questions box right now. In the meantime, maybe, Natasha, could you go over a couple of the books that you mentioned, just to reiterate those?
Sure. What I can do is I can show you. So this is the How Much Is Enough book. Thank you for the reminder. It was originally published as How Much Is Enough, and then republished as How Much Is Too Much. And you can see the little boy on the cover with like 15 ice cream scoops. I really like how they titled it Raising Likeable, Responsible, and Respectful Children from Toddlers to Teens in an Age of Overindulgence. A really fabulous read. This is a book, Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. It's about 10 years old, and so the sections on social media are really old, very old, but the ideas of changing children from being overly oriented towards their peers to maintaining cohesion with parents is huge, very important. And this is The Wealth of Possibilities, a really fabulous, a very deep read about multi-generational families who are financially successful, how to move wealth from generation to generation in a thoughtful way, in a way that doesn't breed that trust fund baby mentality that we're all familiar with, that is excruciating to work with, at least from a mental health standpoint. So A Wealth of Possibilities. And let me see if I can very, very quickly here find that book that I was talking about, The Price of Privilege. Whoops. This is the book that I'm going to send you on a different slide. A really great read by Madeline Levine about how parental pressure and material advantage are creating a generation of kids who are very disconnected with parents and with each other, and how they're very unhappy, much higher risk for suicide, self-harm, much higher risk for drug use, prescription and otherwise, depression, anxiety disorders. It's just a true epidemic. And they're talking about how what creates that is really this toxic combination of high pressure and low connection.
All right, thank you. And we do have a couple of interesting questions coming in. Sandra has asked, how do you suggest teaching children who have everything the value of $1?
That's a great question, Sandra. So first of all, I think it's important to understand that children don't have everything. Children have nothing. Adults have everything. So it is our job to be the barrier that doesn't give kids everything, right? We portion things out. We don't give a child, I hope, a gallon of ice cream. we give a child a small serving. We teach the kids to look at the label, well, how much would a serving be? So same idea with money. They don't have everything. They have everything that you give them. So I really recommend from a very early age to start a system of allowance. And approximately the number that's been suggested in the literature and that I like, it's 50 cents per year of life per week. So my 10-year-old will get $5 per week as her allowance, or she counts how many Sundays there are in a month. We pay on the first Sunday of the month. Let's say there are 4 Sundays in a month, she'll get $20. I also give a small bonus, about 50 cents a week, if she saves something. I don't care how much she saves, but she cannot blow the whole amount. She'll get a little quote-unquote interest. That money is her money to do with as she pleases, and no questions asked. If she is planning a purchase that I think is a mistake, it's very hard for us to not say anything, but let her make that mistake. One year, I will never forget, she went to a fair and she bought one of those stuffed toys that I think she paid $5 for. It was a dollar toy at the most, and she got to shoot a rifle or shoot a bow and arrow, one of those carnival games. She spent her money, we'll let her do it, and she had the worst buyer's remorse, poor kid. But I can tell you the next year we walked by those games, she didn't even look. So she's not going to be a gambler, I can tell you that. So Sandra, they don't have. We have to be that barrier, and we have to dole it out in age-appropriate amounts. Does that answer your question?
I think that makes a lot of sense. We have another question from Julie, who asks, do you think that nurture is more fundamental to the child's outcome or nature?
Oh, that's a great question. Who we are genetically, who we are by birth is huge, no question about it. Appearance, personality, IQ, diseases, all of that is genetic. I think that nurture, how we parent our kids, has a lot to do with outcomes, but I think genetically there's a lot of things to overcome. For that reason, kids on my caseload who are adopted kids, whose genetic predisposition does not match their adoptive parents, definitely have a much harder time. They really do. Expectations is something I work with a lot with adoptive parents. Traditionally, again, stereotypically, adoptive parents tend to be upper middle class or better, with good jobs, high IQs. They tried to get pregnant for a long time. They spent thousands of dollars on infertility. They couldn't do it. They went through adoption agency. Again, thousands more dollars later, here's the baby. And their expectations are this kid will grow up kind of like them. But the truth is, genetically speaking, they're not the same people. They really have to temper their expectations. So for example, the rate of attention deficit disorder is much higher in adopted population because, frankly, having a baby that's unplanned is kind of an impulsive act. And impulsivity is one of the markers for ADHD. So very often adoptive kids do have ADD, have IQ issues, have in utero exposure to toxins of different kinds, and so expectations do have to be modified. So I'm going with nature, Julie, as the most important thing, but I still believe that as parents we can make a huge impact.
Alrighty. We have a great question from Lauren. She asks, how should the financial advisor bring up the subject of overindulgence with children?
Great question, Lauren. I guess I would have to ask you, how would you know that overindulgence exists? What would be your markers that this particular family overindulges, overspends? Can Lauren see if she can type out a quick answer to that, or even speak up?
She says looking at spending habits.
Okay, all right, so you can look at sort of the money coming in, money going. I would have to say that a gentle way of bringing that up would be to ask questions along the lines of, how did that work out for you? I see that you spend thousands of dollars on tutoring, which actually is a very common thing to do. People believe that tutors are just the panacea to everything. How is Junior doing at school? Did that help? I find that tutors become sort of paid adults, paid friends to sit next to your child and do homework with them, hours and hours and hours of homework, which is not the intention of tutors usually. They want to teach a skill or teach a subject matter. They don't want to be a paid homework helper. So you can ask, I see that you spent this money on tutoring this year. How did it work? Do you feel that Junior is doing better? Is he in the right school? You know, there's definitely different levels of schooling. Perhaps the school is too hard. If he has to have 10 hours of tutoring every week just to keep up with the curriculum, that may not be the right school for him. Or maybe he's not relying on the help that school is providing through after-school teachers, assistants, etc. So a question of how did that work out may be a good place to start. Also, I feel that a lot of parents deep down, maybe not so deep down, understand that they're overindulging. They know this wasn't done for me. This wasn't given to me when I was little. So that would be maybe a good way to start by asking, hey, when you were 10, was this something your parents gave you? Or when you were 12, were you also expecting this item or this privilege? And generally they will say, no, this was not given to me. And so that's a good way to start a conversation as well.
Alrighty. And we have a question from Chris. He says that he has an adult trust fund client who's 50 and doesn't need to work, nor will his 2 kids or grandkids. He was taught terrible lessons about his family wealth and it has now become the only thing in his life. What kind of professional help can I get him? Is it beyond my knowledge? He's teaching his kids the same mistakes about financial wealth that he learned.
That's a great question, Chris. So what I would say is it may be time to turn to a financial psychotherapist. Financial psychotherapy is a relatively new discipline that combines some of the ideas from the world of finance with psychotherapy. So as a financial psychotherapist, I'm not, buying and selling financial instruments like insurance. I don't do any of that. I more look at the emotion and cognition, thought processes behind money. There is a National Association for Financial Psychotherapy. You can try looking at that. And I'm also very happy to connect with you. What I didn't show you guys is that last slide. This is my contact information, and I'm very happy to see if I can find a professional in your area who may be of assistance. My website, unfortunately, was part of that problem that happened on Friday. The website is now functioning. Wealthy and Wise Consulting is up and running. The phone number works. The email address works. But I think as of the last time I checked it, if you try to contact me through the website, that part has not been fixed, unfortunately, yet. So just use Dr. Natasha at natashakandel.com, and I will definitely help you, connect you to a financial psychotherapist in your area.
All right, great. Well, that seems like a really great place to end for today. We have some more questions, but we'll send them along to you later, Natasha. We really appreciate you doing this presentation. It was super fascinating, so we thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks for joining us, everyone.